Hello, philosophers. Bad Habits song is about three things. It's about number one, bad habits, which the singer is aware of. The second thing is crossing limits repeatedly and going too far. And the third is inability to change. And although you can see in all of the lyrics, but specifically I'm gonna highlight the lyrics like I can feel the paradise before the world implodes, which is about crossing limits. Like it's just right, it feels amazing, and then it goes too far, too much. And my bad habits lead to late nights ending alone and swearing this will be the last, but it probably won't. So the guy is aware of his inability to change. And every pure intention ends when the good times start again, like crossing limits. And I only know how to go too far. So inability to control the limits and to change. Inability to change. So what is the problem with this? The problem in here is about self-control. And how can we solve it? We can solve it by auto-control. Think about it. If we do something, any kind of habit that we have, we engage in an activity, whether it's good for our health or like society or whatever, whether it's good or not, doesn't matter. If we have a habit, we are going to find ourselves in the spot of acting on it over and over again, regardless of whether we want to or not. So that's by definition a habit. It can change, definitely you can change that, but a lot of people struggle. Actually, most of the people struggle with changing habits because of the strategy they employ to change. They just decide to quit cold turkey or like get really hyper, whether it's like super positivity to like an intention to change their lives for the better, or some sort of rock bottom and they're incredibly angry with themselves, or like the negative motivation to stop whatever they are doing. And both of these things are motivation oriented, and motivation just doesn't work. And sure, a lot of motivation can work for exact duration of the time that motivation can last. So if something really terrible happens to someone and they are really at like the rock bottom, so that extreme negative emotion that they reached finally after months or probably years, that can allow them to sustain that positive change in their life because they want to avoid that negative and get away from that. But eventually, when they start to feel better, when they start to reach a normal level of like mental state of happiness and like satisfaction and just feeling normal, they are bound to be tested again with the same habits, because now they're gonna feel invincible or in some sort more confident to be able to handle themselves and not go too far. So this kind of confidence is gonna be like really bad for them, because they're gonna make the same mistakes and land exactly in the same position and probably even worse with time. So what exactly is the solution? Well, if you're talking about just changing a habit, well, you have to replace the habit instead of changing it. If you think about like the problem with this particular song and this particular gentleman who has this problem of going too far, he doesn't have a problem per se with the activities that he's engaging in, or like sure he's like criticizing the bad habits that he has, but he's more emphasizing on the fact that he goes too far in those bad habits. So if it's a limited range of bad habits, or somewhat like frowned upon habit, or not so good habit, or like almost neutral habit, like he's fine, he's displaying that sense of acceptability towards it. So how can one do that? Because a lot of things that we call bad habits, but what is exactly a bad habit? A bad habit is something that causes some sort of bad effect on a particular aspect of our lives. Now, it doesn't mean that it is bad like entirely in every sense, because if we consider drinking, for example, people would say that's a bad habit, we shouldn't drink. But a lot of people like drinking, and they're not against drinking, they're against like drinking too much, drink to the level that they get sick, or they get like some health concerns, or they can't function in their normal lives, can't hold down a job, can't like manage an adult lifestyle, be independent and self-sustainable. So for most people, drinking, they don't want to stop drinking completely, they want to manage it, so they're able to live without it enough of the time. So even when they occasionally do partake, it makes insignificant difference in their judgment. Like some people will completely be against it, but most of those people never really drink, or at least they try and then they stop, and they have particularly good sense of discipline, which is a very important concept if you think about it. Discipline, without discipline, there is no changing a habit, there is no doing anything in life actually. Even if we think about like the most basic tasks that we operate on, like if we get up in the morning and go to school, or like university, or like a job, or whatever, we do our daily tasks, and they require motivation, they require like discipline. Now, the amount of motivation they require is extremely small, because we have trained ourselves to do that. But if someone new starts that, if someone like who has never woken up at 6 a.m., let's say, for that person, waking up at 6 a.m. for the first time in their life, and then like making that a part of their like default lifestyle, it's going to be hard for them, like extremely hard. But people who are used to waking at that time, and they have been waking at that time for, let's say, a decade or two, they're not going to think twice about it. That's their cup of tea. They don't have any problem with it. So why is that? Now, some people will say it's a morning person and night person, that kind of a difference, but it's more about like how we program our mind and how we see the tasks of the day, and generally in life, like universally, any activity that we do and we do repeatedly, we become fairly good at it. And the more we do those like things, our bodies and our minds become more efficient. Like if you go to a gym and you start exercising, and you have like a workout plan, you work on it for like 3 months and 6 months, and you're making tremendous amount of progress, you're gaining a lot of muscle, you're losing a lot of fat, and you're doing that. But 6 months later, you're going to hit a plateau, and that's not because the exercise plan is bad, because the same plan you can apply to some other person and get like amazing results. But because you have been doing that the same thing for quite a while, then your body has become efficient, so it no longer needs that amount of muscle fibers or that amount of energy to lift that weight or perform that activity, or like burn those many calories as you initially were burning. So they become efficient at it. And also there is this thing in our mind, like attention towards things, like our focus, like more things that we are exposed to, less attentive to them we become. Now this is also true in relationships, like in really long-term relationships, people tend to take granted in their partners what they used to really cherish, and like the value of something is often felt or kind of quantified before getting it or after losing it. But when we have that and we have had that for a while, it diminishes in its like in some sense. So in the same way, our attention, when we are doing the same thing over and over again, like everyone, like whoever brushes their teeth in the morning, they're not gonna even think about it. Like most days they're gonna do the automatic, like autopilot system, and they're not gonna think that what they did when they were doing that. And a lot of people can do multiple tasks like that. Like our brains are not very good at multitasking per se, but if some task is such efficient, and it's been so long that we've been doing that, it's kind of automated to like extreme degree, then we can do a lot of like complex thinking while doing those tasks as well. Like if you think about, like, let's assume driving. If someone who's been driving for 3 months is like, that person is extremely vulnerable on the road. That person needs like full attention on the road. But someone who's been driving for 30 years and professionally, let's say, like they drive a truck or like a cab or something, and they have been driving full time all that time, chances are they're going to be much better at that, and while doing other tasks like talking to fellow passengers or thinking about some thought and those kind of things. Now that doesn't mean that that person is infallible and that person should like operate their phone and all that. Definitely they should be careful still, because it's a dangerous place. It's a dangerous place to make a mistake. Well, if you're boiling a milk and you're like doing some house chores and you do like a thinking task and that attention heavy things and you make a mistake, the cost is insignificant, but when you're on the road it can be deadly. So the cost is high, but the chances of pulling off multitasking is quite good, because if a person only does it once, if a person like talks on the phone or even thinks about some complex idea while driving, if he does that once, he's going to be fine. There's a good chance that he's going to be fine, he's going to be safe. But if he makes it a habit, like if he does that all the time, like if he takes driving granted to that extent that he like operates phone all the time, then that just plays with the probability, and it's eventually gonna happen that it's gonna like end up in some sort of a bad situation. So self-control is really hard, and discipline is obviously necessary, but although it's good to maintain these kind of habits, and we have established that these kind of like automatic like activities that we can get used to, and they can become really efficient, and we no longer have to think about them, and they become like part of us, our lifestyle, and like really part of us. But the problem is like how to start. Like if we suppose we have a bad habit, and so also again, bad doesn't mean that it's bad. It's bad in every sense. Like thinking can be bad as well. Thinking can be a bad habit. Overthinking can be a really bad habit. If someone overthinks to the extent that they have anxiety attacks, or they get like depressed, or like too hyperactive, or like unnecessarily stressed and frustrated over little things, that's a bad habit as well. That doesn't mean that thinking is bad for your brain or general life. It's good. Exercising too much can be bad habit as well. Or not sleeping on time, or sleeping too much. Like anything done is in too little or too much amount, it's bad for us. And repeatedly making the same bad thing, it's a bad habit. So where do we start? How do we fix this thing? Well, the one great solution for self-control is auto-control. And this is how auto-control works. You create some sort of rules, some sort of structures that have some sort of real existence in the world instead of just your willpower. Because if you leave things to willpower, then it's definitely gonna if it's like a snooze button in your own head that you don't even have to make the efforts of pressing, it's automatic, and the more you press it, the more efficient it becomes, and the more automatic it becomes, and the more you don't even think about pressing it. You just create this vicious cycle of procrastination and this constant bad habits and like ignoring discipline and the things that you're supposed to do. So the autopilot, the auto control has to exist in some sense in the outer atmosphere or the outer world, in the environment, so it has an effect on you and you have to physically engage with that in some sense. Now you can choose to make it as difficult as you possibly can, but you want as much as you want, but even if a little bit exists, and it's at least going to make you question it and make you think about it. And if you think about it, then there's a good chance that you're going to play the tennis game, and although it's quite a lot of, like, it's a good enough possibility that you're gonna go in favor of that, like your failure of self-control and your desires and your bad habits, because they have been established for quite some time. But it's definitely better than just mentally like thinking that this time I'll stop and this time I'll be different. No, you won't, because if you could have been different, you would have been different. So to create some sort of like auto control, think in terms of, like, for example, you have a phone addiction, right? And you, like, these days a lot of phones have these like device health and like these kind of things, like apps built into them that kind of limit your exposure, like some sort of like adult phone child locks and something. So you can set these kind of timers, like if you spend too much time on Instagram or whatever, so the phone just stops, it just locks. So then you don't have anything else to do than to accept or engage with it and try to unlock it, which takes a lot of effort. Now if it, like, the amount of effort that it takes, that will also counter with the severity of the habits that you have. So let's say if it's just a unlock button that you have to press, then you really want to spend time on Instagram, that there's a good chance you're going to press that button. But what if you hire some assistant and that assistant just takes your phone and then they throw it out the window, and of course there's some sort of landing mattress over there and the phone doesn't get broken, but and the lift is, you don't have a lift and you live on the like 5th floor or 10th floor. So think about that. Now to like spend time on Instagram, are you going to really climb down the stairs 10 stories and go pick up your phone, especially when it's night and you're like off to bed and you want to sleep, and at that time are you really likely to go down? Like, okay, some people might say yes, we're going no matter what, and that assistant is definitely fired. I get it, but you still understand the principle that this just means that you have a lot of desire, or kind of the habit is very strong, that intensity of that control that it has over you, it's very strong. So you just have to exceed that, you just have to make it more difficult for you to get that. So these kind of like auto controls, it can be like you tell the bartender specifically with a like good tip that do not allow me to have more drinks than a particular number of drinks. So you can control that in that way, or you can, like, there are apps and like websites that allow you to make some sort of bets where you have to do a particular thing every single day, whether it's a workout or whether it's learning new skill, and you put money on the line, and if you fail to do that, the money goes to charity or the money goes to your friend, or you can, like, there are enough things for you to come up with that allow you to force your mind to behave according to you, according to what you want. Now it seems like a harsh thing to treat yourself like this, but it's temporary. It's definitely temporary. Because again, think about it. Now these new kind of activities or sort of limitation that will be imposed on you, they will, like, your default will try to resist them, but as they happen more and more, they're gonna feel more like you're gonna be more efficient with it also. Like accepting, like at first, let's say accepting it takes a large toll on your mood. You feel really bad, you feel angry, and you kind of regret why did you create the system, or maybe you even do a lot of efforts to kind of unlock the phone or get a drink in a different bar and all that. But eventually you're gonna start to accept things, and the cost emotionally or financially, whatever the cost of accepting that, it's gonna become less and less, and eventually it's gonna be as little as zero. So that is ideal. That's what you want. You want to be as close to zero as you can possibly get. So whenever something that happens to you and you're starting to go down that rabbit hole of like bad habits, and there is some sort of auto shut-off point that kind of prevents you to go any further, then you're set. And a lot of things can be done with people, because people are really like, they have a huge force over you. That's like an entire force over you. And I think about it, if you were in army, or you were in some really strict organization or some institution or some company where there were strict rules you had to like follow and obey, what are the chances that you were gonna disobey them every chance you get? Because there be like punishments and consequences. So eventually you're gonna accept those things and you're gonna fall under that. So the solution for this self-control problem is auto-control, and this can solve anything and everything if you do it right. And this is just an example that I'm giving you. You have to be more creative and think like specifically which problems you have, which bad habits that you have like issues with, and then think in terms of what can be some sort of automatic control that forces you practice self-control, and eventually you're gonna build a new habit of practicing self-control and being disciplined. That's habit. Discipline is a habit. Some people are more industrious and conscientious and like born organized. It's not like born organized, it's like that they have more their personalities are more inclined towards being organized and disciplined and all. But that it's like a muscle. You can train it. It's like someone has bigger muscles, naturally bigger, like more bone density and bigger muscle fibers, naturally, genetically. But that doesn't mean that someone else with slightly less dense muscles and like the physicality, that they cannot train and make it better. Like, think about it. They can hypothetically even be better than the guy who has that sense of initially superior physicality, because depending upon the training, of course, like that if that person doesn't train it as much, he just operates in that kind of natural discipline that he has, and someone who really trains them and becomes extremely disciplined, that person can definitely surpass the first one. So it's a skill or a tool, or like a mindset, or like a muscle. You can train it. So practice self-discipline, and the way you do it is initially by auto-control, and then when it becomes automatic, you don't really have to think about it. And actually, it's perfect if you like master this kind of discipline in one aspect. If you like make one goal, like work out every single day, like ask your friend to come over to your place and just shake you and wake you up every single day. Do it for 3 months. Do it for 3 weeks. You're gonna see the change. You're gonna see the change the first time he or she they like shake you and wake you up, and it's gonna feel really terrible in the first attempt. But by the end of 3 months, you're gonna be probably already awake, or maybe you go to their place, an hour early, and start waking them up for the next 3 months. So that's even better discipline. That's you kind of get back at them while like practicing your self-discipline even more, because now you don't even need anyone to wake you. So play with it, this concept and this idea, and make your own solutions and your own plans, and start with one thing: exercise, read more, like use your phone less, sleep on time. There are a bunch of things you can do every single day, and you don't really have to like do 1,000 things. Even if you do like 5 things, even in 1 year, if you make like 5 awesome habits, you're gonna be a completely different person, and you're gonna be surprised how easy they were, and yet you were not doing them for years. And the easy part comes with like the step-by-step process. So you progress. You start small, and you start easy, and then you work your way towards better. So someone with bad habits, they can start with like limiting those bad habits a little bit, like some sort of shut-off points, and then they replace them. When they start to get some sort of control, they replace them with good habits. And that also takes like some sort of force in the beginning, but eventually like you are what you repeatedly do. That's like a really famous quote from somewhere, like, and it's true actually. If you think about it, like, you can be the most lazy kid in school, right? But if someday you decided that you're going to work out every single day, and even if you are like naturally lazy, but if you actually do work out every single day for the next 20 years, are you still going to be like termed as the lazy kid? Like, does that even matter? That personality inclination towards a particular thing, does that even matter? If you've been consistently working out, you're going to be called like a fitness freak. Everyone is going to look at you, and you're going to look good like physically, and they're going to say, they're going to be impressed, and they're going to ask you for tips. How did you do that? And hopefully you can give them these tips, or like share my video. So alright, philosophers, this is it for this video. Check out my channel for more. Adios.